Clock's running.
All right. Okay, everybody, welcome to the March 7th, 2022 Real Estate Committee meeting. It is approximately 3:34 in the afternoon. We will start with an invocation from myself. Let's just go with the traditional moment of silence, but this time maybe let's think about all the people that are caught in the very unfortunate conflict overseas in Ukraine. All right. Appreciate that from everybody. First item on the agenda is the approval of the February 22nd, 2022 minutes. We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
We've got a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. First item on the agenda is an ordinance to authorize the mayor to execute a deed and any other necessary documents. This is for the Charleston's Museum of the Children's Museum of Charleston. And I believe Miss Copeland will be handling this one.
Yes, sir. That is correct. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. This is about the Children's Museum of Charleston. If you can see my screen, I've got the GIS map pulled up right here. Part of this would require a subdivision of the property. So that's why we're before you today, to really just make sure that council would in fact bless this deal. So what the Children's Museum is asking for specifically is that the city quit claim this piece of the building here to the museum, to include this section behind here, under a 99-year lease, $10 a month. And with that, we would have the right of reverter should the museum ever go for profit or sell to someone else, or move off the peninsula. And part of this, why they're asking for this specifically, is this screen right here. They plan to use the building as collateral to borrow some money to make significant improvements to the building, including what you see here, this exterior feature. They're going to change the location of the entrance to the building. Right now it's facing that new bar restaurant called the Bodega. They're going to pull that up and put it on the other side of the building here on Ann Street. And so really, we would like to get council blessing first before we go through the subdivision process with staff. Staff has already sat down with members of the board with the museum just to make sure that, one, they had the necessary setbacks in order to make all of these improvements should they get the deed to this building. And everything seems to be a go as far as staff is concerned. We'd just like to hear from council and committee, of course.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Copeland. I see that the mayor has his hand up. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, if I may provide just a little more background, this property, affectionately known as the Camden Tower Sheds, was a former railroad property that came into ownership by the city some decades ago. And it just so happens when I worked for the city in the 90s, I kind of was a lead staff person on the project, which facilitated the lease, the current lease, to the Children's Museum. The building was an absolute wreck. I mean, it's similar. If you've been in that city garage property over on Line Street, it was kind of like that. And so the city entered an agreement, and the Children's Museum did the upfit to the building, did the renovation at their expense. They raised the money, and the city just prevented the long-term lease. So they're at a juncture now where they want to make major capital improvements to the property and continue to operate it in, perpetually as a children's museum, which I think is a good use for the city. And if they ever chose to do anything different, we'd have a reverter bringing it back to us, right, Julia or Lee? Yeah. And they claim, and I concur, that the fee simple ownership will help them with their financing of multi-million-dollar improvements to the property and to the building. And so that's why we bring this to you, to support them and their long-term viability and sustainability, and allowing them to be able to get a nicer facility for our city. And anyway, I just thought I'd share that background.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see we have a few more hands raised. Councilman Gregg.
I have a process question. So why would we do the quit claim before the subdivision? Or do you have, I don't understand. Oh, sorry, Julie's shaking her head.
No, we would subdivide first, of course, through staff, and then take that through the survey process and the quit claim process.
Okay.
I think the idea is to get a little bit of feedback from us on the general concept here before we go about that process, because subdividing, getting a surveyor out, this is complicated stuff, and these guys are backed up these days. I think I saw Councilman Shade's hand and Councilman Waring.
I think Councilman Waring was ahead of me, Mr. Chairman.
Sounds good, and I hope all these questions are not going to be taxed against my my speed of committee meeting. But in any event, Councilmember Waring, there's a little bit of running out the clock here. Go ahead, Councilman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first, hello everybody. I signed on a few minutes late, but I support the museum. I don't understand why the lease needs to be 99 years. I mean, basically a century. I don't think we did that for Mr. Navarro over at the tennis center, and he's putting in, I think, $40 million. I mean, you're talking about, I think we can structure it from a time standpoint that will enable them to get funding in place sometime shorter than basically a century. Okay. I see the legal hand went up in the air, but
I apologize. I misspoke. It was not a 99-year lease. It was, we would be quit claiming the property to them in fee simple. So my apologies with that. We would be selling the building to them. Right now, they've got about 47 years left on the lease that they're currently under. And their argument is they would like to have fee simple title in order to get better loan conditions with the banks.
so do we need to lease it a little bit longer, extend the lease? My point is, it's a tepid subject, but, we had a situation with the law school and the Wolf Street property and a reverter clause with the Wolf Street property. And when another entity came into the law school and took over the law school from the original purchasing group, obviously that situation has changed. And we're in court on it now as a result. So this children's museum, I don't know, another group were to come in similar to the law school. I like the idea of city maintaining ownership. I do like the idea of helping the children's museum secure financing to do what they want to do, if longer lease terms allow that. But why do we give up the asset? Why do we give up the asset entirely? That's the part that we know reverter clauses can be contested. So that's the part that if I didn't already have that history and not already had experience that we have with the law school and the reverter clause and the complication thereof, I would hate to see that happen with this property. So I think we can accomplish the same thing by, if they had 47 years and they need 60 years to secure the financing under the lease terms, I think we can do that. Even give them additional options under the lease terms they can secure the financing that way, and the city and future councils would have better options, because no doubt about it, 60 years from now, none of us going to be around on council. I would be about 100, the mayor and I would be about 132, something like that. I'm 126 years old. Peter also, by the way. Councilman Gregg and Appel and Ms. Bailey and Ms. Copeland all will be around. But anyway, so that's the only piece. But I think the goal here is to help the Children's Museum. I think the goal is to help them secure financing, in particular while interest rates are down on amenable terms. And whatever we have to do that, besides just getting rid of the property entirely, I think we should do it that way. But I don't think we ought to just entirely give up the city asset like that. You know, what anniversary did we celebrate, Peter? From 1670 to now? So 350. 350. There are going to be some council people down the road that's going to say, it may be 100 years from now, but it's going to say, why did they do that back then? So that's my point. I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Waring, and I see the mayor's hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond that or Councilmember Shade had his hand up first.
Oh, that's right, Councilman Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question for whoever can answer this for me. Because I remember Councilmember Shealy and I paid a visit to the museum about, I guess, a couple of years ago, perhaps. And I was a little surprised by the numbers, and I just need to get this clarified. How many Charleston area residents are we serving with this museum right now? Does anybody know that? Because it seemed to me that there was, and I may be just totally wrong and got my figures confused, but it seemed like the number of residents that we were serving were not as proportional to the city's population that I thought. There were students coming from outside of the city limits that we were serving on this museum. And I support the museum. I'm a big fan of it. I think they do a great job in what they are accomplishing. It's an innovative method. It's very alive, and I know they got some good summer programs out there. But can we, before we decide what we're going to do on this, can we get sort of a breakdown on the number of children that we're actually servicing in the city of Charleston, and even more importantly, the number of children on the peninsula? I'm sorry.
We can get that. I should say though that one of their focuses, Councilman, is on Title I kids in the Charleston County School District. So you may see an awful lot of kids coming from outside of the city, but they're part of the Charleston County School District, and they're really focused on Title I kids, which are the most disadvantaged kids in those schools.
And Rick, that may be right. I just, for some reason, in the back of my head, there was some of the figures were just a little off for a reason, but I do think there is a significant number of Title I children that they are servicing. But I'd like to have a better idea of who are our clients on this and who we're benefiting. And Councilmember Waring's point, we're going through this mess right now with the School of Law, and I don't want to repeat that. So if there's another alternative to us selling the property, I just want to weigh our options on that if we can. Is there any urgency on this? Is this something that has to be done immediately? So is it okay if we just defer it till we get some of these answers looked at as to, I want them to be successful. I want them to get the funding that they need. But if there are other options besides selling it, I'd like to find out first. They talking about a 0.5 percentage point. They talking about a 2 percentage point difference on their loan. Do we need to extend at least 65 years as opposed to 70 years? I mean, I just got more questions. I have answers right now, so I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, thanks, Councilman Shade. I'll throw one other question onto the pile here is, I don't understand how a bank would lend money and take a mortgage on a piece of property that got a reverter clause in it, where the collateral could essentially just get swept up from underneath them if the business was essentially handled in a different way that triggered the reverter. So in other words, I'm calling into question whether or not this concept is even something that would work. Maybe it will. It just kind of strikes me as something that's a little bit exotic from a commercial lending perspective. So that may be something else we could look into. But Mr. Mayor, I saw your hand was up.
Working backwards, I think as long as the bank had their eyes open that the borrower intended to maintain a children's museum there, which is in fact their intent. I don't know where that would matter to them. They must know that going into the deal. And just to share with you, and back to Councilmember Waring's point, was totally not lost on myself or city staff regarding a long-term lease or a longer-term lease versus a quitclaim deed. We certainly had discussions with the museum folks about that. And I think y'all know, I mean, they've been lobbying for a few years now about the upgrades to this facility. They've been trying to raise some money. COVID hit, they really went in the valley there in terms of attendance and operations for a while and donations. So, it gets a little bit in our discussions, maybe quote negotiations, but I mean, their request early on was for the city to give them a good bit of money to help them do this renovation, and with the claim, the point of view that, hey, it's a city building, we don't own the building, y'all do, and you should be, replacing the HVAC system and helping us do all these improvements, which they had spec'd out to be something like $6 or $8 million worth of stuff, and which would make it much nicer. It needs updating and all like that. Don't get me wrong. So it led to a discussion. Well, that's a valid point. But of course, my institutional knowledge was, well, gee, we just didn't set it up that way back in the 90s. The city leased you the property as is, where is, and you all agreed to take care of it, well, they then rely on all the things they're doing for kids in our community, the Title I students that Rick just mentioned, and all like that. So it kind of got down to, gee, would you want to continue the lease and give them some serious financial support? Or their claim is that the fee simple agreement helps them get the funding and the financing necessary where they don't need to ask us for a couple $1 million. So that's really the fork in the road that it kind of came down to. Am I right, Julia?
Yes, sir. That's spot on.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilman Shade.
So, Mayor, to your point, and I hear you very loud and clear about that, and that's a good thing to consider. But can we get some results from them of what we're looking at? I mean, they're looking at a $10 million or a $5 million renovation project. If they can't raise this money through a financial institution, they will come back to the city and ask for $2 million. I mean, I like to get sort of a more broad view of what they're doing here and what they're asking for. I mean, you may be right on point with this, with your comments, that they can go to the bank and borrow the money and they'd be up and running, and no ask from the city on anything else in the future. Or they can go to the bank with a 75-year lease and get the same rate. I just want to get some more. I want to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges before we make this decision to sell this property to them.
All right. We'll be glad.
That'd make my decision a little bit easier, I think.
Councilman Waring.
I think there's a way we can find a way to help the museum. Okay. I don't think this is the only way financially structure something. So I think helping the museum, I think that's going to happen. Okay? But back to Councilman Jade's point of children who we're helping, Roper St. Francis closed this OBGYN unit because there weren't enough babies being born on the peninsula to make it profitable. I was on the board of Roper St. Francis Hospital when that happened. So that younger population really, if you look at it in terms of 99 years or 100 years or whatever, doesn't look too good for the peninsula in that regard. Now, obviously, St. Francis, which is West Ashley and East Cooper over there, their OB units are just busting at the seams. Okay, to get back to and as far as free and reduced lunch, I think the last census said that 17% of the city now is, if you believe the numbers anyway, I don't think it's too far off, but I don't know if it's this low, is African American. But at the end of the day, we want kids to have fun, whether they're free and reduced, whether they're Black, Hispanic, white, whatever. We are members of the museum, so it's an easy sell for my grandkids to sucker me to go down there and crawl through them tubes and stuff and come out stiff afterwards. But anyway, we do it. There was some talk, Rick Giroux may remember this, before the Pig building was torn down, about possibly moving the Children's Museum, West Ashley at the old Northbridge Piggly Wiggly site. Okay. Which, if anybody's been to Discovery Place in Charlotte, would have been a nice little potential right there. But that's certainly off on another path now. So to say that we can't help them with their finances, look how we did the Visitor Reception Center. I think that's a good format to kind of look at. City put money in, obviously CVB has more money than the Children's Museum, but they do have friends at the Children's Museum. There's a financial package we can get put together to help the Children's Museum with the renovations they'd like to do, and we'd like to see happen at that point. But I still think the city should control the property. And I think when you get back to some of the demographics that Councilman Shea is talking about, you may see a lot of tourists going there, which means maybe they qualify for some of the tourism dollars to help go towards that renovation. So I think all of us on the same page want to help them get the money to do what they want done. I think we've been approached with one way to do it, and that's it. I think there may be one or two other ways out there to accomplish the same goal.
We'll be happy to ask them to come back to the next committee meeting, give you all a full update on who they're serving and what they're planning on the renovation, and make the pitch to you.
Sure.
Right, that sounds good. Does someone want to make a motion to defer along those lines?
So move.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion?
You had a hand from Councilmember Gregg there a minute ago.
Oh,
You
sorry,
did.
Councilmember Gregg.
I had just had a question on the ownership structure of the Charleston Museum. If anybody knows how that's structured, does the city own that property as well?
But that was a county museum.
That's a county? Okay.
I think it is, isn't it, Mr. Mayor? The county.
It's 50-50 county and city, I'm pretty
Okay,
sure.
all right.
Just curious how if they're able to make that work. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, good deal. We got a motion to defer on the floor. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. We look forward to hearing from these folks at our next meeting or an upcoming meeting.
Mr. Chairman, one thing before we leave that subject.
Sure.
Again, them coming in with one proposal and one proposal only, are there going to be any discussions? I'd certainly be happy to be involved with it. Because as I said, I'm a friend of the museum on what other ways they can do it besides. I would hope we just won't hear what we just heard just now. In other words, 2 weeks from now, we got one option and one option only.
We'll certainly make them aware of this discussion today. In fact, they can go back and listen to it if they like.
Great, you're right. You're right.
Make them aware the concerns or the discussion here today.
Right. You're right about that. You're right.
Certainly. And I think we look forward to hearing from them. And I think there's a unanimous desire to see something happen there. And, right across the way, one of the first matters, I remember from my time on the real estate committee was, changes to the lease that allowed essentially the bodega and the share house, these two new establishments right across the way to get going. And if y'all haven't been down there recently, you should go check it out. They've done one heck of a job, and they've really infused some life into that part of the city. And if we can do this with the Children's Museum, that little block of, off of Ann Street right there can really be rocking and rolling. So in any event, on to our second item on the agenda. This is a request for an approval of an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute on behalf of the city of Charleston a lease agreement with Lucier Enterprises LLC. This is for the cigar shop over there next to the Francis Marion. And I believe Ms. Bailey has the report on this one.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chairman Appel. Good afternoon, council members. Chairman Appel is correct. This is a lease agreement for Sweet Bee in the Francis Marion retail complex. It's the cigar lounge that's been there for a number of years. This lease is an initial 5-year term with several renewals. The base rent is $36 a square foot, which is around $38.16 per month with a 3% annual increase. And that's right in line with market rate there. The tenant would also be reimbursing the city for property insurance, CAM expenses, and taxes. And he also will be responsible for the majority of the maintenance and upkeep on the space. Just to give you a little bit of background here, this is one of those city-owned properties that for a number of years, I believe since the mid-90s, has been under a master lease agreement with an outside party. And so the city was not handling the property management directly, but that master lease has expired. And the real estate management division is going to be taking over and self-managing the space now. So we're excited about it. And this lease expired around the same time as the master lease. So we are transitioning into the property management there. You may have noticed also that Suite A there is vacant. We're working on getting that on the market quickly and are excited to get going with property management. And I'm happy to answer any questions I can about the lease or about the space in general.
Do they have any good Cubans over there?
I hear that they do. I am not a cigar aficionado, so I don't really have any personal knowledge, but they seem to have a happy clientele when I have popped in there to meet with the business owner.
I move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All right. We've got a motion on the floor in a second. Any discussion? I'll just add my 2 cents. I know the proprietor of this business. He's a class act and he's a friend of the city's, and it's in good hands. And they've got some exciting things planned for that part of the city. So good partner with the city of Charleston. Any other discussion?
The mayor had his hand up.
Mr. Mayor.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe Lee could share with us the net difference that the city will see in revenue, given that we will be managing this ourselves. And I would also point out that the property, even though it's owned by the city, since we are leasing it commercially, property taxes are levied on this space as it rightfully should be. So that continues on, but if I'm not mistaken, we get a nice bump in revenue from per square foot. Lee, what is that like?
Mayor, yes, sir. I'm happy to provide a little bit of information on that. So this past year, I believe it was this past year, and Matt Bullock, please forgive me if I'm incorrect, but under the master lease agreement with the property management company handling things, I believe our net revenue for the city was around $36,708. Currently, with us taking over self-management, And without that additional space next door to Suite B being leased out yet, we're already making more money. We are projecting, looking at market rate and looking at hopefully getting Suite A leased out, getting that additional terrace area mayor under lease again. There's potential revenue for the city of around $140,000 as opposed to the $36,000. So we're very excited to be taking over the management. I think it'd be a really positive move.
Sounds like a good deal.
Good deal. Councilman Gregg.
I have a question on the 3% escalation. Is that typical for a lease agreement in the city right now? That seems like rents are going up quite a bit higher than 3% per year.
So 3 to 5% is what's sort of standard right now.
Okay. Do we have any room to negotiate that between now and the end of the 5-year term, or are we locked into 3% per year for 5 years?
The way the proposed lease that you've received is drafted, we would be locked into the 3%.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion, or Ms. Bailey, you got something else to add?
Chairman Mattel, I was just going to very quickly second your comment too about the business owner. I did want to say that I've heard very positive things about him in the property management company. He was a great tenant for them. He's been wonderful in my dealings with him. And even during the challenges of COVID, he was maintaining rent and maintaining himself as a really good tenant in the building. So I think that's pretty impressive.
That's right. That's right. Well, good deal. Anybody else have any comments or anything else for discussion on this item?
How many square feet is the space?
The space is 1,272 square feet.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. The ayes have it. That brings our committee meeting to a close. Anybody have anything for the good of the order, or any item they want to mention before we sign off?
I just want to point out the proficiency that you ran this meeting with.
Trying to keep up with everybody. I think we did some good work today. Children's museums, smoke shops. I mean,
I know.
between.
When I pass by and see you puffing on a stogie, man, I'll know why.
I've never been a big
No,
cigar
I know.
guy
I'm
either.
just kidding you. I'm too healthy to do that, which is great.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Alexis would definitely pack up and leave if I got into cigars. That would be the final straw. All right, guys. Well, thank y'all for your time and everybody's great engagement as always. And we'll see some of y'all at 4:30 for Public Works and Utilities. Of course, everyone tomorrow night.